Hi there, it's Memory from Friends Abroad Relationship School, and today I have got a very interesting short film for trauma on the screen. So the short film is entitled Wasp, simple as, an Andrea Arnold Oscar-winning short film set in the United Kingdom. It is a short film, 25 minutes, and it's available on YouTube free, but it is a very powerful film. So I'll just get into it. The themes that I picked up, the first one is single mothers or single mothering. So basically, we have a lady with 4 young children. Her name is Zoe, and she's got 4 young children. And at the start of the film, we find Zoe going down the stairs, no shoes on. She's carrying a baby who doesn't even have a nappy on, and she's marching with her, 3 other children in tow. And she's going to another lady's house. This lady is married, and or she lives with a partner. And then she knocks on the door, and the moment the lady comes, she's fighting with this woman. And it turns out that her child, one of her children, fought with the child of this woman, which happens with children, but does that make adults fight? So basically, what I picked up here is how defensive we can be. That's defensive parenting, rather than try to communicate with the other parent and resolve issues. We jump to conclusion and try to defend our children, but children recover if allowed from their from their arguments or their misunderstandings, and they can get on with life. But if we as adults get between the children, then they might not be able to recover from those situations. And also, the example that they were teaching children there is very concerning. Fighting in front of the children, and to take children to someone's house in order to fight the other woman. And also, she asked her child, the children they looked under 10, all of them, with Kelly, the eldest, probably around 9. And she was the one who was asked to hold this baby who didn't have a nappy on. And that's really concerning, to have another child look after another child because a parent wants to fight. And consequently, what happened was she was beaten up by this other woman, which was, quite hilarious, but also sad at the same time. And then when they left this woman, there's also lessons around parenting there, where she had her children lifting up the finger against this woman, and that was also quite sad and concerning. And then she goes back home, and she's on her way back home, and she meets this guy. He's in a car and he's calling her, and she was shy because she didn't have shoes on, she wasn't dressed up or anything, so she was very self-conscious. And what did she do? She gives the baby again to Kelly, the eldest child, so that Kelly could look after the child. And then she goes and talks to this man, and she lies to this man about her children, which is an indication of shame. She was ashamed of admitting that these were her children, which is pretty sad. And then in that, she also accepted a date with this guy. And so this is where the whole story now begins to unfold. They knew each other from before. And this guy also mentioned something very significant in this film about an ex of Zoe's, Mark. And he seems to say that Mark was actually not a great person for Zoe. And then she dismissed that. And I'm sure she was lying when she said that she hadn't seen Mark for years. And another theme that I picked up in this is the fact that most of the time, I'm not saying that this is with everybody, but you find that in a situation where people break up, it's mostly one parent who ends up with the struggle of looking after the children. And this is what this woman was doing. she was looking after the children, and it doesn't look like there was any help from anybody else to support her with looking after her children. And that can be really difficult when you are a single parent and you have to get on with it. And then with the pressure of wanting to date, she is now trying to get back into the dating field with 4 young children in tow, and that can be a challenge. That's a very powerful theme that I sort of picked up in this film. And then one other thing that I picked up also is how we've got this culture of idolizing the celebrities, because she idolized Victoria and David Beckham. And when she met this guy and the children were asking who he was, she told them that it was somebody that she knew. But then they said that he looked like David Beckham, and they were all very excited about that because they were so much into this celebrity culture of really idolizing the Beckhams. And this guy also, David, did not seem to be doing quite well, judging from the situation. He was driving a car, and it seemed like he was, the car was really struggling to start and all that, which is normal, but it did look like, he wasn't doing much with his life. And then she went home. Another theme that I picked up is about poverty in the first world. It was really sad what this woman was doing, apart from the fact that she might not have had enough. She was also parenting in a way that's very challenging. She couldn't find enough food to give her children, and so consequently she took sugar and dipped the baby's that thing that the baby sort of sucks on, and she dipped that in sugar and gave that to the baby, and then she gave the packet of sugar to the other children to share. And I think it's one of those challenging things that we can do when we are struggling, because she couldn't really find enough food in the house. She had this bread and she was trying to put together something. And then another theme that I picked up in the first world, also childcare. Childcare can be really a problem. I grew up in Africa, and childcare really is available. It's not a problem there. But in the first world, especially in UK, I've experienced challenges around childcare, and it can be really expensive. And this woman had planned a date, obviously, with this guy, but it was difficult for her to find someone to look after the children, and she was really keen to go out on that date. And so what did she do? She took her kids with her out on a date. Very interesting, which was fine because she didn't leave them alone, but at the same time she took them to a pub and left them outside. The pressure of wanting a relationship against all odds. She didn't want the fact that she had children to interfere with her trying to get into a relationship. And that is what we do sometimes, unknowingly putting romance before children. But when we are coming into this information and awareness of trauma, it is important that we find out and learn what we are doing, why we are doing it, and who else is being impacted by our behaviors. So she goes to the pub to meet this guy, and the children are excited. Young children, they want certain things. They wanted McDonald's, they wanted chips. And she promised that she could get that. And then this guy tells her that because she's a modern woman, she needs to buy him beer. And what does she do? She prioritizes buying beer for this man instead of buying chips for her children. And so she ends up buying crisps for the children and one glass of Coca-Cola of drink to give to the children, and then they had to share that. And of course they were not happy because children, they know what they want, and we can betray them or lie to them and tell them little stories, but they do know that they wanted this and they are not getting it. And of course the baby was there, and she left the baby with the other children to stay outside and play outside while she is having a date in a pub. And it was getting dark, with the children playing outside, and the children with their ages, they were sleeping, they were going off to sleep. And the other daughter, the eldest daughter, called her. She knocked on the window and told her that could it be best that they go home? And she went mental. And again, that's abuse, verbal abuse. Being angry with a child who is being turned into a parent at such a young age to look after the other children, simply because a mother wants a relationship. And then there's a lady who knew this woman. Foremost, the woman who she fought with said something about social services because of the way that she raised their children. People were aware. And then there's somebody at the pub also mentioned that seeing her in the pub, was wondering where she had left her children, whether she had left the children alone. And that was really sad to know, because I think they knew her habits in the area. And then the next thing is she stayed on until it was dark with this man whilst the children are outside on their own. And then she went to sit with this guy in the car and started kissing. And they almost actually slept together in that car, except something happened. Initially, the children were singing and wishing for McDonald's, wishing for pizza, wishing for something, for some food that they wanted. And then by chance, they manifested someone dropping food on the street. Some people who were drunk, they dropped food on the street and they ran to pick that food up and they ate that food up, which was pretty touching and pretty sad. And they also gave the baby one of the pieces of meat. And of course, there was a wasp that landed on the baby's mouth, and then it went into the baby's mouth. And the children started screaming because they were helpless. They couldn't do anything about it, and they called their mom. And she's in the middle of touching this man, and then she had to run out of the car, and she saw the wasp in the mouth, and then she was praying that she doesn't bite the baby. And of course, the wasp came out of his mouth, flew out of his mouth, and she was again mad at Kelly, and she said, I told you to look after him. And she's putting all this responsibility on a child who's under 10 to look after a baby. And in the end, the children started getting upset and they were crying, and she realized their mistake. And that was lucky. Hopefully that was a permanent realization rather than just a realization for the moment. The guy she was with, David, came and witnessed this. And of course, she had lied that the children are not his. But now he's noticing and witnessing that the children are actually hers. I mean, not his. And he's witnessing that. And she's now ashamed. But she's hugging her children and apologizing to them. So in the end, David buys food for the children. You could see his face, how touched he was by the situation, and he bought them food. And then the story ends with David driving them home and telling her that he wanted to have a chat. So this is the story, this is the film. It's a very short film, but it's about someone looking for love in the wrong places. We look at Zoe and probably think of her childhood, her upbringing, for her to turn out like that. Most probably abandonment trauma. Most probably wanting very much to find a relationship and make it work. Most probably with anybody that she could come into, sort of come across or encounter. And this guy, David, they knew each other before. And of course, he knew who she had been with, and he wanted to be with her. But whether that was, again, a healthy situation is a challenge to understand. But the realization that we can transmit trauma is an awareness that we need to be conscious of. We need to be aware of how our actions and our behaviors and our desperate desire for a relationship can impact our children. And what we do, how we communicate with our children, can impact them. And the behaviors and the tasks and roles that we assign to young children, such as turning them into caregivers of their brothers and sisters, can actually harm them. I've been there myself. I thought when you have children, they need to look after each other, but it's not the responsibility of children to look after each other. You decide to have children, you need to be able to look after your children, not to ask another child to take care of the other children. Yes, it's nice for them to learn, to be supportive, to learn some skills in life, but it's not their responsibility to look after the other children. And children just need to be loved and to play. And in this situation with Zoe, she could have taken the time probably to maybe look for a job and put a little boy in nursery, and then sort of find a way to add extra income on the table. But I think people have a challenge around universal credit, around benefits sometimes, where they say if you work too much, you might not get enough. And maybe that's where she was at. But she was really struggling. You could see how she was struggling with the children, with not enough food to put on the table. But then again, you would think that in such a situation where she was struggling like that, the last thing that she would be looking for is a relationship. I would have thought that the one thing that she would have been focusing on was to make sure her children were fed. But actually, she was trying to find a relationship, and also she actually chose to buy a man a pint rather than buying her children something to eat. And that is food for thought for us as women and as parents about where our priorities lie. Relationships are good, if they are there and they can work. We find somebody we can get on with, somebody who's healthy for us, and things can work, but not at the expense of the well-being of your children. Because she left these children outside the pub. Anything could have happened to those children. They were really young, but she didn't even consider that, the consequences of leaving children outside a pub where people, any kind of people can hang out. It was lucky that nothing happened to them. And it was also lucky that nobody was there to report her. So it is that we need to learn the consequences of our behavior on our young children. They don't really show it sometimes, because like those little children, sometimes they would cheer on, like when she was fighting with this lady, and also they would cheer on about the David Beckham thing, and they'll just get along with what she was doing because they needed to be with their mother. But you would start thinking about what kind of adults they are going to be if they grow up in such an environment. That is food for thought. I hope that was helpful. And I hope we continue to observe our behaviors around our children. We are not perfect, and we might already have made some mistakes around parenting, but we can learn to do things differently as we come into this information and recognize that a romantic relationship is not the be-all and end-all. It's not the number one priority. We need to be in a position to love ourselves first. If Zoe loved herself first, she had healed her traumas and looked into self-parenting, she probably could have taken a step back. And even as she looked for a relationship, she would have looked for a relationship from a place of clarity, where she wouldn't have to hide her children or to drag her children along to such an unsafe space and expose her children to unsafe environments. I hope that was helpful. I hope you continue to work on the quality of your life before relationships. Thank you so much for watching, Penia and anyone else. See you soon. Bye-bye.